is the code name for the destroyer Noah, waiting to recover Friendship 7. But John Glenn cannot hear the message.
Roger, altimeter off the tank indicating 80,000.
Keep talking, Al.
Roger, rocking quite a bit. I may still have the left tank on. I can't stamp it either.
Roger, reading you loud and clear. How you doing?
My condition is good, but that was a real fireball, boy.
So close in this set.
I had great chunks of that retro pack breaking off all the way through.
Very good. It did break off. Is that correct?
Roger, altimeter off the tank indicating 80,000. Going to drogue early. It's
Roger, reading you loud and clear.
Drogue came out rocking quite a bit. I may still have some of that tank on. I can't stamp it either. Drogue came out at 30,000 in about a 90-degree yaw.
Roger, is the drogue holding on?
Roger, drogue looks good.
So close in this set. Roger.
Scope did not come out.
Big headway.
Roger, pumping the scope out.
That's over.
Say again. Friendship 7 going to drogue early. It's a rocky first. Roger, re-entry checklist complete. Standing by for me. Drogue is out. Roger, drogue came out at 30,000 in about a 90-degree yaw.
Roger, is the drogue holding on?
Roger, drogue looks good.
Roger.
Scope did not come out.
Big checklist.
Roger, pumping the scope out. 10 snorkels are open. Say again. Roger. Roger, re-entry checklist complete. Standing by for me. Chute is out in reach condition at 10,800 feet in beautiful chute. Chute looks good. On O2 emergency and the chute looks very good. Rate of descent has gone to about 4.2 feet per second. Are open. The chute looks very good. Roger. Hello, Mercury recovery. This is Friendship 7 in reach condition at 10,800 feet in beautiful chute. Chute looks good. Roger, steelhead. Friendship 7, the chute looks very good. Over. Chute looks very good. Rate of descent has gone to about 4.2 feet per second. The chute looks very good.
Home is the voyage.
Hello, Mercury recovery. This is Friendship 7. Do you receive?
A journey of 81,000 miles. Through 3 days and 3 nights.
Roger,
In just 4 hours
Friendship 7,
and
the chute
56
looks very
minutes.
good. Over.
At 3:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friendship 7 comes to rest aboard the United States destroyer Noah. And John Glenn home returns to the people of Earth. Behind a change of clothes, a journey of 81,000 miles. A short through 3 days and 3 nights. Then Glenn leaves 4 hours, heading for the aircraft carrier Randolph. Under the golden splendor at 3:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time of the day, Friendship 7 comes to rest aboard the United States destroyer Noah. And John Glenn returns to the people of Earth. A change of clothes, a breath of cool air, a short debreathing. Then Glenn leaves the Noah, heading for the aircraft carrier Randolph, under the golden splendor of his 4th sunset of the day.
Is down here. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I get back and do some more things. And I had another rest period. So this time I took 1 foot out and did a little agility. Oh, there it is.
In the space outside and to look out in any direction was pretty neat.
Hey,
it's humans out there. It's humans out here. It's humans on the frontier.
Okay.
When I opened the hatch,
so I get back and do some more things. And
I had
another
the whole
rest period.
universe in front of me.
So this time I took 1 foot out.
Then you sort of poke your head out, flip around, and you take a look around, and you know, it's really a holy moly kind of moment.
That was when I first learned, I think, what
To be
the
in the
definition of what it
spacesuit
truly is to
outside
be
and to
alone.
look
Being
out
in space,
any
being in
direction
Earth orbit,
was pretty
floating
neat.
It's
truly
humans
a
out there.
magical
It's humans out
experience.
here.
It means
It's
an
humans on
exciting
the
day.
frontier.
It
When I
means
opened the
it's a
hatch,
day that it's going to be a lot of work,
I had the whole universe
but very
in front of me.
rewarding
It
work.
was
NASA's
spectacular.
astronauts
Then you
and
sort of poke
international
your head out,
partners
flip
suit up
around,
for
and
modern
you take a look
spacewalks with
around, and
training
you
and
know, it's
experience.
really a
Humans suited up,
holy moly
leaving the
kind of
vehicle
moment.
and going
That
out on
was when I first
spacewalks.
learned, I think, what
Exploring,
the
you know, going
definition of what
beyond
it
and
truly is
always
to be
going
alone.
into a
Being in
situation we've
space,
never
being
been
in
to
Earth
before,
orbit,
to fix
floating,
something, a space station,
is
to
truly
deploy,
a magical
experiment, or
experience.
longer term.
It means an
I
exciting
think of
day.
spacewalking
It
on
means
Mars.
it's a day
Spend
that
a lot of
it's going
time
to be a
thinking
lot
about
of
how
work,
humans are going to
but
explore
very
Mars.
rewarding work.
Suited
NASA's
with some
astronauts
pretty
and
new cool
international
technology.
partners suit up for modern spacewalks while floating out in the void of space. They are
Humans
standing
suited
on
up,
the shoulders
leaving the
of
vehicle
giants,
and going out on
making new
spacewalks.
discoveries, by
Exploring,
building
you know, going
a
beyond and
prestigious
always
legacy.
going into a situation we've never been to before, to fix something, send a space station, to deploy,
did
an experiment,
the
or longer term,
What's special?
I think of spacewalking on
Why did
Mars.
the
So
rest
spend a lot of time thinking about how humans are going to explore Mars, suited with some pretty new cool
We're
technology.
shooken up by Sputnik, and we
And
marshaled
floating
our
out in the void of space, they are
resources,
standing on the shoulders
put
of
together
giants, making new
winning
discoveries
program.
by building
One of the
a
things that
prestigious
drove us
legacy.
into human space flight was fear. Was the fear when Sputnik went overhead in 1957 and people began to realize that there was another nation in the world that had the capability of putting something into space that could actually pass over the United States. That's not a good way to do a sustainable program, just through fear.
Clearly our motivation was a race. It was to beat the Soviets. And we had to do that for international prestige.
And so that set us on a sprint to the moon.
One of the things
We will
that
get to the
drove
moon
us
within
into
the
human
decade,
space
and we
flight was
did.
fear. Was the
But
fear
it didn't set us
when
up for a
Sputnik went over here
long-term
in
exploration program in
1957 and
space.
people began to realize that there was another nation in the world that had the capability of putting something into space that could actually pass over the United States. That's not a good way to do a sustainable program, is through fear.
Clearly our motivation was a race.
Beginning
was
of
to
a very
beat the
unpopular
Soviets.
war.
And we had to do that for international prestige.
The
And
Soviets
so that set us on
literally
a
owned
sprint to the moon.
space at that
We will
point
get
in
to the moon
time.
within
Yuri
the decade, and
Gagarin
we did.
back in
But
in
it didn't
early
set us up for a long-term
1961,
exploration program
made one
in
orbit
space.
around the Earth. Alan Shepard, 60s, became the hero that this country needed.
America's initial and successfully crewed space missions, known as Project Mercury, were followed by Project Gemini, the proving ground that would lead to the Apollo missions and the landing on the moon. On the Soviet side, cosmonauts and engineers were doing similar work to extend spaceflight duration, improve rendezvous techniques, and to develop the capability to leave the spacecraft.
Made one orbit around the
And it was
Earth.
dubbed
Alan
by
Shepard
NASA as an extravehicular
became
activity,
the
or
hero
EVA.
that this country needed.
America's initial and successfully crewed space missions, known as Project Mercury, were followed by Project Gemini, the proving ground that would lead to the Apollo missions and the landing on the moon. On the Soviet side, the first successful egress and engineers were doing similar work to extend cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, improve rendezvous on March 18th, and to develop the capability to leave the spacecraft, making him the first person to was dubbed by NASA as an extravehicular activity, or EVA.
And what I saw, and I saw just half of the world. In order for us to conquer we were 500 kilometers, we need to learn how to operate outside of this. And nobody,
The
even
first
up
successful
until
egress
now,
from the
nobody is
spacecraft
flying
while in
that
orbit was
high.
achieved by cosmonaut Alexei Leonov on March 18, 1965,
task was
making
to
him
get
the
out
first
and get
person
back
to
in.
complete an EVA, or spacewalk.
And he had basically,
And what I saw,
as best I understand,
and I saw just half of the world, because we were 500
after he
kilometers
got out of an airlock,
above
and he
the
was
Earth.
literally out there in a vacuum of space.
Nobody,
And,
even up until now,
and once
nobody is
he
flying
got
that
through
high.
that tunnel, his job was to turn around and get back in. Task and had a great to get out and get back in, getting back in, because he had to turn around in that tunnel. He had basically a pressurized space in it. At that time, even for us, tunnel was like after he got out of an airlock, and he was literally out there in a vacuum of space. Move anything. And he literally had to deflate. And once he got through that tunnel, at that point, his job was to be able to turn around and get back in. To reduce his size, had a great deal of difficulty getting
Later
back
that
in
year,
because he
Gemini
had to
4
turn
stood ready to
around
launch
in
from
that
Cape
tunnel
Canaveral,
with
Florida, with the primary objective of
pressurized
gathering the
space
results of an extended
at that
4-day
time,
mission
even
on
for
both
us,
crew and spacecraft.
was like
Gemini 4's
being
original
inhibited
semi-conservative
by
mission
a
was then
pseudoplaster
expanded
of
to
Paris. I mean,
include,
it's hard to
amongst
move
other
anything.
things, a
And he
dramatic
literally
exit
had
from
to
the Gemini
deflate
spacecraft in what would be America's
at that
first
point in time to
spacewalk.
be able to
On
reduce
June
his
3rd,
size to get back in.
1965, the second that year, mission Gemini 4 stood ready to launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida, with the primary objective of gathering the results at
of
2:46 p.m. Eastern Time, both crew using a handheld gas gun. Gemini 4 stepped out of his semi-conservative mission, leaving crewmate was then expanded to include, amongst other things, vastness of space, a dramatic exit from the Gemini spacecraft, becoming the first American what would be America's first spacewalk. On June 3rd, 1965, the second crewed mission of the Gemini series carried James McDivitt and Edward White into space.
This is the greatest experience.
At 2:46 p.m. Eastern Time,
We had Ed
using a
White's
handheld gas gun,
magnificent
White
20-minute
stepped out of his
quote
spacecraft,
walk in space.
leaving crewmate
I don't think
McDivitt
he'll ever get
behind
any
to
better,
witness the vastness of space,
any
alone,
better
becoming the first
film.
American astronaut to complete the space.
It was space euphoria, I think, from everyone from Ed and Jim McDivitt to everyone on the ground, and mission control everybody. I mean, it was spectacular. He had a little gun, he could control his body, he could move where he wanted to go. We had Ed White's magnificent 20-minute
the Gemini
quote
program
walk in
continued
space.
to refine
I don't
and
think he'll ever get
extend
any
EVA
better,
procedures as more astronauts
any
followed
better
with tethered spacewalks in Earth's
film.
orbit.
It was space
Well, you know the
euphoria, I think,
difficulties that we
from
had
everyone
in the Gemini program doing
from
spacewalks
Ed
because
and Jim
the state of
McDivitt
the
to
art-
everyone on the
the
ground,
state
and
of
mission
the
control
art
everybody.
needs
I mean, it was
to improve.
spectacular. He had a little gun, he could
Solve
control
the
his body, he
difficulties
could
there.
move
When
where
you
he
jump
wanted
out
to
and you
go.
try to get something done.
It set us
Well,
up.
you haven't
As time
practiced in the
progressed,
free-fall zero
the Gemini
condition.
program continued to
And so
refine
it's
and
Newton's
extend
second law.
EVA
You push in
procedures as
something, you
more
move your
astronauts
body instead
followed
of
with
getting the
tethered
work done.
spacewalks in Earth's orbit.
And so that whole business, you see, Well, you know the difficulties that we had in the Gemini program doing spacewalks because
Americans
the state
like
of the
Gene
art,
Cernan,
the state
Michael
of the
Collins,
art needs to
Richard
improve.
Gordon,
But
and Buzz
you
Aldrin
saw the
continued
difficulties
the
there when
competition
you
with
jump
the
out and you try to
Soviets.
get something done.
In the Gemini
well, you
days,
haven't practiced
when they
in
were
the
trying
free
to do
fall
the first
zero-G
spacewalks
condition.
from a
And
capsule.
so it's Newton's second law.
The
You
first
push in something,
EVAs,
it
the
moves
first
your body
spacewalks
instead
were
of getting
not
the work
very
done.
productive.
And so that
The crew
whole
members
business,
got
you
outside,
see,
they didn't have anything
we
to
just
hold on
evolved and we
to,
grew.
they kind of flailed around.
Since Leonov and
They
Gemini
couldn't do fairly simple
Americans
tasks.
like Gene Cernan,
And
Michael
they
Collins,
learned from that they
Richard
had
Gordon,
to have a better way
and
to
Buzz
train.
Aldrin continued
And they
the
started to use
competition
water
with the
tanks at that
Soviets.
time.
Every
In the Gemini days,
progressive
when they were trying to do the first
EVA
spacewalks
had,
from a capsule.
different little hang-ups.
The first EVAs, the first spacewalks
Frustration,
were not very
overpowering,
productive. The
getting
crew members got
overheated.
outside, they didn't have anything
Next
to hold
came
on
the
to,
Apollo
they kind of
program,
flailed around.
with one of its lofty goals
they couldn't
to
do
land
fairly simple
Americans on the
tasks.
surface of the moon,
And
then
they
return
learned
safely
from that
to
that
Earth.
they had to have a better way to
We're going to the
train.
moon.
And they started to use water tanks at that time.
Hey, we're going to the
Every
moon.
The Gemini suit, you could pretty much compare it to
EVA
what
had,
the launch entry suit
different
was
little
like. You know, it
hang-ups.
was
frustration,
not custom made,
overpowering,
but you
getting
could, you know, the
overheated.
link net stuff could be
Next came the Apollo program,
configured
with
so
one
that
of
you
its
did have
lofty
a certain
goals
mobility
to
in
land
the arms
Americans on the
and-
surface of
and
the
the
moon,
knees.
and then return them safely to
The
Earth.
difference being the Apollo suits
We're
were all
going to the
custom
moon.
made for each crew member.
I mean, hey, we're going to the moon.
The Gemini suit, you could pretty much compare it to what the launch entry suit was like. You know, it was,
liftoff. 32
not custom
the hour. Liftoff on
but you could, you know, the link net stuff
The
could
first
be
steps on the lunar surface were
configured
performed by Neil
so that you did
Armstrong
have a certain
and Buzz
mobility
Aldrin.
in the arms.
It was
and
July
at the
21st,
knees.
1969.
The
and
difference
the world
being the Apollo
irrevocably
suits
changed
were all
with the steps
custom
of
made
men
for each crew member.
very far away from the Earth.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
I do remember the first
past
landing
the
on
hour.
Apollo 11.
Liftoff on
I
Apollo
remember,
11.
I guess in high
The
school,
first steps on
staying
the
up and
lunar
watching
surface
that,
were performed
and going
by
out
Neil
and looking at the moon
Armstrong
and just
and Buzz
marveling
Aldrin.
about their people.
It was
up there.
July 21st,
I think we were all
1969.
captivated when Neil
And the
Armstrong
world
did the ultimate
irrevocably
spacewalk,
changed
which
with the
was
steps
to
of
actually
men
go out
very
of his
far
vehicle
away
and end
from
up
the Earth.
walking on the surface of another body in our solar system.
You have a mass with the backpack in.
I do remember the first landing on the
body
moon,
and
Apollo
everything
11.
else.
I remember
And
I guess in
you
high school,
move
staying
around
up and watching
you
that,
kind of think
and going
that
out and looking
you
at the
can
moon and
change
just marveling
direction.
about their people up there.
But that,
I think we
that's
were all
sort of
captivated
why
when
at
Neil
the end
Armstrong
of,
did the ultimate
our
spacewalk,
2-hour,
which was
2.5
to
hour
actually
EVA,
go out of his
I
vehicle
got in
and
front
end
of
up
the
walking on
camera
the surface of
and
another
bounced
body in our solar
with
system.
different ways. You have a mass
I was really
with the backpack
personally
and
impressed with the Apollo
the,
EVAs and
the
spacewalks.
body
Can you
and everything
imagine
else.
the first humans
and
to ever
you
walk
move
another
around
planetary
and
body
you
to the
kinda
moon?
think
So
that
just fantastic.
you can
And
change
you kind of see that
direction.
2-foot bunny hop. So
that's
we had
sort of
great
why
spacesuits. We
at
kept
the
the
end
Apollo
of,
astronauts alive.
Once we got the lunar rover set up,
EVA, I got in front of the
we were
camera
ready to go
bounced
be
around,
lunar explorers, if you will.
different ways of moving.
And part of the lunar rover,
I was really personally impressed
had-
with the
had
Apollo
plastic
EVAs and
fenders that-
spacewalks. Can you imagine
that when it
the
was
first
folded
humans
up, we had
to
to
ever walk
unfold and they
another
slid
planetary
down to
body
cover
to the
wheel.
moon? So just
But the reason
fantastic.
we
And
had
you kind of
fenders
see
on
that
these
2-foot
things were because
bunny
the
hop.
lunar dust
So we
was-
had great
was
spacesuits.
one of
We
the
kept
biggest
the Apollo
problems
astronauts
we
alive.
encountered. Once we got the lunar rover set up, it was almost the texture we were ready to go. The graphite lunar explorers. This was just the opposite. It would get in and on everything. So I was walking, doing some work around the lunar rover, that when it was folded up, we had to unfold and they slid down to cover the wheel. But the reason we had extensions of the fender were because the lunar dust was one of the biggest problems we encountered and immersed us in all this. It was almost had to figure out a way. The graphite maps, this was geology maps, and taped them together. And took a couple light clamps and everything. So I was walking, doing some work around the lunar rover, and what do we tape rock hammer in my pocket with the handle sticking
We went
out.
from there into the Skylab program, and we went to the A70B at that time. So
the dust
Apollo,
would have
you
come
know,
right
so on
over
the
the top
surface
and
with
immersed us in all
A7L,
this stuff.
our
So we
spacesuit, and we
had
do
to
have
figure
a
out
6
a way.
gravity,
We took 4
and we
maps,
do have the life
lunar
support
geology
system
maps,
on the back,
and
which is
taped them
taking care of
together
all our
and took a couple
physiology,
light clamps
the cooling,
and
the oxygen,
clamped them
removing the
in
carbon
the
dioxide,
job.
and all the rest of that.
And what do we tape
In
them
the
with?
Skylab program, we were on an umbilical. We went from there into the Skylab program, and we went to the A7L physiology, if you will. So the umbilical, you know, between the spacewalker and the Skylab space station, our spacesuit, and we do the life 6 of the gravity. When we went, we do have the life support system on the back, which is taking care of all our physiology. But the big difference between the oxygen and the carbon dioxide was all the rest of that. In the Skylab program, we integrated the backpack, the umbilical itself provided. So Apollo was you wear the backpack there and you bring the hoses around. The umbilical between the spacewalker and the Skylab integrated provided the hard upper torso and the life support system. When we went into the shuttle program, importantly to us, that riding a backpack away with the zipper. But the big difference that is zipper work and Apollo, and I had was taken that zipper to a vacuum many times. We integrated the backpack with the suit itself. Around and so Apollo was you wear the backpack there and you bring and the zipper is maybe 3 feet in the shuttle program, and it is integrated. The hard upper torso and the zipper is the only thing between you and importantly to us.
SpaceLink has actually saved some of our programs, so we can look at Skylab.
Now the zipper worked.
Skylab, the habitat was getting very, very hot, and the astronauts had to go outside in their spacesuits, perform the extravehicular activity, and they literally saved Skylab.
Without EVA, Skylab would have not been habitable.
And the zipper is maybe 3 feet long, and it is a zipper.
Canopy over the
and a zipper is the only
EVA
thing between you and
eternity. Mission.
SpaceLink has actually saved some of our Another great example from the Gamma Ray Observatory mission. Skylab, the habitat was getting very, very went out hot, and literally got an antenna deployed outside in their spacesuits, a major extravehicular activity. So really important interaction when humans are suited and kind of saving very large missions.
My first job in the astronaut office after my initial training program was completed was to start working on EVA.
EVA saved that mission.
In fact, we
another great example from the Gamma Ray Observatory mission.
Design what their
Jerry Ross and Jay Abt went out and literally got an antenna deployed, and it saved a major observatory. So really important interaction when humans are suited and kind of saving very large missions.
My first job, I worked with those crews, helping them to initial training, figure out what tools we had available to start working, test out, and operate spacewalks in space out in the payload area of the orbiter. In fact, we worked then we progressed from early crews.
The suit was not a brand new
design
suit
what their spacewalks would be like.
I had run it through
STS-5 was the
all
first planned spacewalk
on the floor.
They had
it's the 1G test. I had run it through vacuum testing.
And then STS-6
I had run it through certification where the number of cycles you put on
I worked with those crews, helping them to
I've been in the water
figure out what
so
tools we had available to them. From that, then we started to develop things like the manned maneuvering unit, the little rocket backpack. Then we progressed from there. Demonstrated
the suit
on
was
several
not a
flights
brand new
and
suit
used in some
anymore.
cases.
In
I
dramatic
had run it
fashion,
through
doing the first fully
all
untethered spacewalk
on the floor.
Bruce
It's the
McCandless
1G
zoomed
test. I
about
had run it
the
through
manned
vacuum
maneuvering
testing.
unit.
I had run it through
This equipment test would
certification
lead
where
to the
the number
retrieval
of
of
cycles you
stranded
put on
satellites
every
on
all the
subsequent
joints.
missions years later.
I've been in the water with it, so I was afraid.
From that, then we started to develop things like the manned maneuvering unit, the little rocket backpack that we demonstrated on several flights and used in some cases.
Over the following years, extravehicular activity became one of the space traveler's most exciting and necessary tools in the maneuvering tool belt. This equipment test was July 17, 1984, on cosmonaut Svetlana Savitskaya broke the proverbial glass ceiling and became the first woman to walk in space. Catherine Sullivan followed shortly after on October 11, becoming the first female American astronaut to perform a spacewalk. Over the following years, extravehicular activity became one of the space traveler's most exciting and necessary tools in his upper tool belt. As time progressed, so did the need for July 17 technology in 1984, as cosmonaut Svetlana Savitskaya broke the proverbial glass the essence of NASA became the first woman to walk in space.
There was one time when I was on the intermechanical arm, it was on the Hubble mission, and I was being moved from one place to another, and you really have no sensation of movement when you're on that arm. It's just so smooth.
This is the first chance I had to stick my head out the hatch on our EVA on day 7.
As time progressed,
and I was
so
working
did
on
the
the
need
tools.
for
I was putting
advanced
the sockets on
technology
for the
and
next
utilities.
whatever task I had to do next.
Complicated missions
and the
and
guys
space
stopped
program-saving
and they said, "You
maneuvers
have to
are
look
the
at this. You just have to
essence
stop
of
and look."
NASA's
And so I stopped and
extravehicular
looked, and
activity.
we were over the Gulf of
There was
Mexico.
one time when I was on the
entire
North
North America.
America.
It was on the Hubble mission,
And
we could see
and I
Aurora
was being
over
moved
Canada.
from one place to
And it was
another.
just an
And
amazing
you really have no
view.
sensation of movement.
We
when you're on
started
that
to
arm.
develop
It's just so smooth.
little power tools.
There's nothing. There's no
We
drag of the
developed
water
more
pulling you back,
wrenches
and so
and
you
other
don't really
kinds
know
of
you're
tools that
moving.
we could use for other
And
types of
I was working on the
failures
tools.
that
I was
we
putting the sockets
identified
on
in
for
the
the
payload
next
bay door
whatever task I had to
mechanisms
do next.
to
And the guys
remove
stopped.
debris
and they said, "You
or
have to
to
look at this. You just have to
disconnect
stop and
things
look." And so I stopped and
should they
looked,
not
and we were
function
over the Gulf of
properly.
Mexico.
From the Apollo
You could see the
program's
entire
deep
North
space
America.
missions around and to
And
the
we could see
moon,
Aurora up
to
over
the
Canada.
U.S. Skylab,
And it was just
Shuttle,
an
and
amazing
International
view.
Space Station
We
programs.
started to
Spacewalkers
develop
have
little
suited
power
up.
tools.
On board the
We
spacecraft, you've
developed
got
more
the
wrenches
today
and other kinds
two
of tools that we
spacewalk
could
crew members
use
who
for
go out,
other types
work
of
cooperatively
failures
together. They
that we
become brother and
identified in the
sister,
payload
brother
bay
and
door
brother, sister and
mechanisms
sister.
to-
They learn how to work
remove
as a
debris
very
or to
coherent
disconnect
team.
things
They
should they-
actually
should they not
understand
function
each other's
properly.
moves.
From the
They know
Apollo
where they're
program's
supposed to be.
deep space
You've got
missions around and to
and
the
nowadays
moon, to the
robotic
US
operator
Skylab,
who's
Shuttle,
generally
and
moving
International
one, at
Space
least
Station
one of the crew
programs.
members around on a
Spacewalkers
robotic
have
arm.
suited
You've
up.
got the
On
IV
board
crew member, the
spacecraft,
intravehicular crew member who is
today,
for all intents and
two
purposes, the
spacewalk
choreographer
choreographers
who go out,
is the
work
whole
cooperatively
mission.
together. They
Kinda
become
committed to
brother and
memory,
sister,
knows
brother
when
and
somebody's
brother,
out of
sister and
position,
sister.
they
Knows
learn
when
how to
somebody's
work as a
about to
very,
get too far away
coherent
where they can be
team.
safely
They
tethered.
actually
Back
understand
on Earth
each other's
in the
moves.
mission
They
control
know where
center.
they're supposed
You
to be.
have the primary
You've got,
person on console
nowadays,
that is
the
robotic
EV,
operator who's
or the
generally moving
extravehicular
one at least one of the crew members
in the
around
back
on a
room.
robotic
They
arm.
probably
You've got the IV crew member, the
anywhere from
intravehicular crew member
25
who
to
is
100
for
people
all
who are
intents and
looking at
purposes the
data
choreographer
from
is the
each of
whole
the
spacewalking
mission,
astronauts.
kind of committed to memory,
They're looking
knows
at
when
data
somebody's
from
out
the
of position,
spacewalk that's actually
knows
going
when
on.
somebody's
and then
about to get
somewhere
too
in the
far
world
away
where they
like
can be
at a
safely
place
tethered
they
back
built
on
the
Earth
spacesuit
in the mission control
for,
center.
somebody that
you have the
designed
primary
the
person
procedure
on
that's being
console,
done,
whether it's in
the
Denver, Colorado,
EV,
or Connecticut,
or the
they're also
extravehicular
looking on
controller,
and they have
in
their
the
own
back
data
room.
that
They
they're
probably
evaluating,
have
getting all that back
anywhere from
into
25
mission
to
control
100
in
people
Houston,
who are
telling
looking
the
at
flight control
data
team,
from
okay, we
each
see
of
this
the
developing,
spacewalking
we see this
astronauts.
happening.
They're
You need
looking
to
at
let
the
the crew
data
know.
from
So,
the spacewalk that's actually going
probably
on.
thousands
And then
of people
somewhere
supporting
in the world,
the development
like at a
of
place
the types of
they built the
spacewalks that we're gonna
spacesuit,
do,
and
somebody
and
that
then
designed
hundreds
the
actually
procedure that's
involved in
being
the
done,
spacewalk
whether
on
it's
that
in Denver,
particular day.
Colorado,
It was
or
part
Connecticut.
of our training to
They're
make
also
sure
looking
that,
on,
you know, even
and
though
they
you
have
might
their
be
own
nervous,
data that
try
they're
not to show
evaluating
them
and
that
getting
you're
all
nervous.
that back
Everything had
into
to be
mission
laid
control
out
in
perfectly.
Houston,
you
telling
know,
the
I mean,
flight control team,
from
okay,
the
we
start,
see this developing,
you had
we
your
see this happening.
checklist.
You
It
need
was
to let
all
the crew know.
laid
So,
out properly. You know, which
probably
pocket
thousands of
every
people
pin went
supporting
in.
the development
you know,
of the types
even
of
down to
spacewalks
where
that
the
we're going
pocket
to
they
do,
want their
and
sandwich
then
put in.
hundreds actually involved in the spacewalk
It has
on
been
that
the
particular day.
astronaut's mantra
It was
to train,
part of our training
test,
to make sure
and
that,
succeed.
you know, even though you
One
might
of
be
the
nervous,
things that
try not to show
astronauts
them that you're
learn to
nervous.
do to,
Everything had to be laid out
to look
perfectly.
at
You know, I
a
mean,
situation
from the
and
start,
don't panic
you know, you
about
had your
anything.
checklist. It
You'll
was
make it
all
worse.
laid out properly.
but
you know, which
think
pocket
carefully.
every pin went in.
Did you do
you know,
something wrong?
Even
and
down
then
to
fix
where
it?
the pocket
Well,
they
the
wanted
astronaut prayer,
their
which is,
sandwich
please
put
God,
in.
don't let me screw this up. That's the first
It has
thing.
been the
I think the
astronaut's
biggest
mantra
fear
to train,
that I had, and
test,
maybe many
and
astronauts as well, is
succeed.
not that I was going to get
One of
hurt,
the
it's that I
things
was going to
that
mess up.
astronauts
Because
learn
everybody's
to do
watching. You have such a limited
to
time
look
out there to
at
get done
a
what needs to be
situation
done.
and
And you
don't
really
panic
don't want
about
to make a mistake.
anything.
was
Will make
cold.
it worse.
So that was a
but
little surprise,
think
but we should have should have anticipated cold, but it turns out at that point we had only done hot space.
Well, the astronaut prayer, which is
until
please God, don't let me screw this up. That's the first thing.
I think the biggest fear that I had, and maybe many astronauts as well, is not that I was going to get hurt, it's that I was going to mess up. Because everybody's watching.
Thought they would be able
to limited time out there to get done what needs to be done.
Back-to-back EVAs and do all that they were supposed to do. And they
so
not
that
only
was a little
completed
surprise,
them in
but
spite
we should
of
have
obstacles that
anticipated
almost
cold, but it
at every
turns out
turn on
at that
almost
point
every
we had
single
only done
EVA,
hot space
but they did them superbly and left
until
Hubble
STS-6 they had all
incredible
been
shape. The STS, I think they did a tremendous 125 crew, planetary, the final Hubble service astrophysics, and just the field of almost none of us thought they would be able to people successfully really work hard five and you plan back-to-back EVAs and do all that they were supposed to do.
When you're doing a spacewalk,
and they not only completed them in spite of obstacles,
you're in your own spaceship.
At every turn on almost every single
but it
EVA,
keeps you
but they did
from
them
the
superbly
vacuum
and left
outside
Hubble
and your crewmates inside
in incredible
the space
shape. And I think they did a tremendous service to planetary science, astrophysics, and just the field of spacewalks.
And I was holding on to a handrail,
showing people
looking up
that
at
if you
the
really
Earth
work
go
hard
by
at it and you
behind the
plan it
Hubble.
and you execute the way
And it was
you
a
plan,
truly remarkable
there's
moment.
nothing we can
But I did realize when you're doing a spacewalk, how far away we were from the Earth's atmosphere, in your own space homes. It's your space from our companions, but inside the space shuttle, from the vacuum outside. I wouldn't say that I felt a sense of loneliness, but a sense of awe. I had one moment on the Hubble Space Telescope mission. We're able to fix the Hubble. My spacewalking partner was on the other side of the telescope, and I was holding on to a handrail, looking up at the Earth go by behind the Hubble.
Have been solved in extreme
And it was a
ways,
truly remarkable
such
moment.
as fixing the
But I
Hubble
did
Space
realize
Telescope's blurry vision,
how far away we were
turning a
from
possible
the Earth's
billion-dollar
atmosphere, from
piece
our
of
homes,
space junk into
from our
one of the most
companions
revered
inside the
scientific
space shuttle.
instruments of human
And
history.
I wouldn't say that I felt a sense of loneliness, but a sense
Missions
of
like
awe.
Hubble tested the
that
mettle
we're
of
doing
spacewalkers,
these kind of things, that we're
an
able
elite breed
to
among
fix
an
the Hubble,
already
to orbit the
out-of-this-world group of adventurers.
Say that on Hubble, it's a very
Through
fine motor skill,
spacewalks,
human being
complex
very close in, a
problems
lot
have
of
been
hands
solved in
work.
extreme ways,
So it's almost like doing
such as
surgery
fixing
when
the
you're
Hubble
Hubble
Space
in a suit
Telescope's blurry
versus
vision,
being a longshoreman
turning a
when you're on
possible
space station,
billion-dollar
where you're
piece
just
of space junk
hanging,
into one of the
big
most
livets
revered
around and
scientific
changing stuff
instruments
out.
of human And that history. Tradition continued with the Wall of EVA. Missions like Hubble built tested the immensely successful International Space An elite breed among an already
It's been 50 years since NASA's first EVA, when Ed White went out on Gemini 4. We've come a long way since that first one. Building the International Space Station, it was very, very EVA intensive. And when we were planning for it, everybody talked about the wall of EVA. We're never going to be able to accomplish all this. And when you look back on what we accomplished, it was pretty darn amazing.
So on my first flight, we were right in the middle of the construction of the space station.
It's been 50 years
so of
since
course,
NASA's
every
first
shuttle
EVA,
flight
when
that went
Ed
up
White
was
went
full
out
of
on Gemini 4. We've come a long way since that first one.
Every single
building the International
EVA
Space
was
Station,
an important
it was
and necessary
very, very
component
EVA
of the assembly
intensive. And
sequence.
when we were
So,
planning
I think
for
we
it,
all
everybody
feel
talked
that,
about the
we
wall
had
of EVA.
a hand
We're
in
never
laying
going to
the
be able to
keystone, or
accomplish
however you
all
want
this.
to
And when you
describe
look
it.
back
To
on
see
what
the
we
ISS
accomplished,
now,
it
the
was pretty
spacewalks that
darn
they do,
amazing.
So on my first flight, we were right in the middle of the construction of the
Station
space
is more
station.
than 14 years old.
So of course,
Built
every
by
shuttle flight that went
spacewalkers
up was
and
full
continues
of
to be
spacewalks
maintained and
just
upgraded
putting
through
pieces together.
spacewalks in the most
Every
advanced
single
spacesuits
EVA
the world
was
has
an
ever
important
seen.
and necessary
Spacewalks are
component of the
not,
assembly
they look
sequence.
like they're
So,
incredible
I think we
fun,
all
and
feel
they
that,
probably are
you
for the
know,
crew
we
member when you
had
really
a
get
hand
down
in
to
laying
it.
the keystone,
But we must
or
never
however you
forget how
want to
dangerous
describe
they
it.
are.
To see the ISS now,
Today,
and the
the
spacewalks that
International
they do,
Space
got
Station
new
is being
repairs,
used
and
as a
it's just
proving ground
incredible.
to conduct the research
Station
and test
is
the
more than
technologies
14 years
that will
old,
take humans built by spacewalkers and continues to be
into the solar
maintained
system
and
than
upgraded
ever
through
before.
spacewalks to the area most advanced spacesuits the world has ever seen. On to
Spacewalks
Mars.
are not,
We
they
will
look like
pioneer
they're
space,
incredible fun,
not just to
and they
visit,
probably are for the
but
crew
to
member
stay.
when you really get down to it.
We're
We're going to migrate out over over the the next next 5 to 10 years
Today,
into
the International
repositioning
Space Station
humanity
is being used
in
as a
lunar
proving
orbit.
ground
So we will
to conduct
spend
the
most of our
research and
time
test the technologies
orbiting
that
the
will take
moon
humans
and
beyond
doing more
low Earth
technology
orbit
development,
and deeper
but
into the solar
learning
system than
basically
ever
how
before.
we operate
To the
in
area
a
around
low
the moon,
gravity
to an
or
asteroid,
no gravity
and on to
environment,
Mars.
because that's the way it will
We will
be when we go to
pioneer
Mars.
space,
Mars's
not just to
gravity is
visit,
less than
but to
Earth's.
stay.
Operating
We're going to
there
migrate
will be
out over
significantly
the
different
next
5 to 10 years
in low Earth orbit.
when we
into
do the
repositioning
asteroid redirect
humanity
mission and we
in lunar
we
orbit. So
reposition
we
and
will spend
spend
most
most
of
of
our
our
stable
time retrograde
orbiting
around the moon and doing more
then
technology
the dominant
development,
gravity
but
for that
learning
group
basically
of
how we operate
explorers,
in a,
if you
in a
will,
low
is going to be
gravity
the asteroid
or
itself.
no
And that's going to
gravity
be a
environment,
very,
because that's
very
the way it
low
will be
gravity
when we go to
field, if
Mars.
any at all.
Mars's gravity
So we've got
is
a
less
lot
than Earth's.
operating
Development
there
of
will be
tactics,
significantly
techniques, and
different
procedures than operating here in low Earth
Never
orbit.
know
when we
when you build a
do
piece
the
of
asteroid
hardware.
redirect mission and we
guys back in the
reposition an
70s,
asteroid into a
and gals
stable
that built,
retrograde
designed,
orbit
and tested
around the
the
moon,
original EMUs.
then the
which we're
dominant
still flying
gravity
today, by
for
the way.
that
The life support
group
systems
of
are still the original life
explorers,
support
if you
systems
will,
that we had,
is going to be the asteroid itself, and
30-some
that's
years
going to be
ago.
a very,
You
very,
never know where
very
that hardware
low
is gonna
gravity
be.
field,
To see
if any
that
at all.
suit, you know,
So we've got a lot of
to see it go on
development
over the
of tactics,
decades
techniques, and
into
procedures.
We never planned on hundreds
Never
of
know when you build a
spacewalks.
piece of hardware
And the key thing there is in structural integrity is you identify weakness before failure.
From here,
which we're still
NASA
flying today,
engineers,
by the way. The
technicians, and
life support systems are still the
astronauts
original
will
life
figure
support
out new
systems that we
ways to
had
overcome the next set of challenges.
30-some years ago.
You never know where that hardware
decided to orbit the Earth a lot instead of going deeper into space, and now I think it's time for us to take that step beyond orbiting the Earth and moving on. We don't have the same momentum we had when we had an enemy that we were afraid of.
And the key
so
thing
we are not in competition as much as I think we need to be in cooperation with other nations in order to move
NASA
all
engineers,
of us
technicians, and
space.
astronauts
Mars is really extreme, which is the great part about it. It's challenging. So when we get to Mars,
we decided to orbit the Earth a lot instead of going deeper into
space.
Spacesuit. Now I think it's time for us to take that step beyond orbiting the Earth.
Really something new in terms of to be very lightweight, be very mobile. We don't really have a locomotion suit.
So we are not in competition as much as I think we need to be in cooperation with other nations.
So you're weightless, which is great, but that's a very different environment. Now when we get to Mars, Mars is really extreme, which is the great part about it. It's challenging. So we're going to be walking, you're going to need to search for life, provided your life support and pressure digging things up. So you really are an explorer. So it is akin to Lewis and Clark expedition, something new in terms of moving very lightweight, be very mobile. The next frontier. We don't really have a locomotion suit. We have spacesuits
on another EVA stroll back on the moon or on Mars.
So you're weightless, which is great. But that's a very different environment. Now when we get to Mars, we have gravity, 3A's gravity.
We are
so we're
currently
bipedal
further
again.
than
So
ever before
we're going to be
in
walking,
human
bending,
history
or
on our
going
journey
there to
to
search for
Mars.
life, looking for fossils and digging things up. So you really are an explorer. So it is akin to Lewis and Clark expedition and exploring
American engineers
and
and
moving out
scientists
to
around
the
the
west.
country
It's
are
really
working
the
hard
next
to develop
frontier.
the technologies,
anyone who goes
including new spacesuits,
on another
that
EVA
astronauts will
stroll
use to one day
back
live
on the
and work
moon or
on
on
the
Mars,
red
and
planet.
we'll do both one day.
Next stop,
I know that'll happen.
Mars.
Take duct tape.
We are currently further along than ever before in human history on our journey to Mars. American engineers and scientists around the country are working hard to develop the technologies, including new spacesuits, that astronauts will use to one day live and work on the red planet. Next stop, Mars.
Humanity has always been interested in exploration. If we really want to go to the moon, we have got to figure out a way to keep our propellants cold long enough. My name is Monica Guzik, and I have the coolest job at NASA because I work with cryogenics. Cryogenics is the study of things at very low temperatures. We've got electrical connectors we can plug into. So we want to store things like oxygen or hydrogen, but if you store them as a gas, the only way to get a whole bunch of molecules in there is to raise the pressure really high. So instead, if we make them really, really cold, always turn into a liquid, so they're way more efficient. We really want to go to the moon. So this is going to be a liquid oxygen test. I always knew I wanted to be an engineer since I was a little girl. My name is Monica Guzik, and I have the coolest job at NASA. We're going to put insulation over this. Cryogenics is the study of things at very low temperatures we can plug into. So Cleveland is the rock and roll capital of the world. I really enjoy rock and roll music, so I try to go to a lot of concerts. The only way to get a whole bunch of molecules we improve cryogenic technology to raise the pressure really high. Space applications, it make them really, really cold. They turn into a liquid. Now we're rolling into the Artemis generation, and we're still doing. So this is going to be a liquid oxygen test. I always knew I wanted to be an engineer since I was a little girl. My dad was an engineer, and I just thought engineering was so cool. We were going to put insulation over this. Ended up getting a summer internship here at NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, and just really sort of fell in love with NASA. Cleveland is the rock and roll capital of the world. I really enjoy rock and roll music, so I try to go to a lot of concerts. When we improve cryogenic technologies for space applications, it always has a trickle-down effect. Now we're rolling into the Artemis generation, and we're still doing that.
And void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light on earth. And God saw the light. As it was good. We would like to send God divided the light from the darkness. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the darkness he called by the earth was without form. And void was the first day. And darkness was upon the face of the deep.
The void, the darkness, then light, then life. And from life came man, joining the caravan for the long, slow journey through a world of discovery, invention, exploration. His marks, his milestones stretch out through the centuries. His footsteps echo down through the corridors. In the beginning, the void, the darkness. July, then 1969, then life. Florida. The and from life, the caravan quickened. Joining the caravan as man reached a slow journey through a world of discovery, invention, exploration. His marks, his milestones stretch out through the centuries. His footsteps echo down through the corridors of time. Time, July 1969 in Florida. The footsteps, the caravan quickened. The corridors shortened as man reached outside his world into another void. They go about their lives, taking only a sideways glance at the reminders of that milestone. Reminders, images that vaguely jog our memory. Today in Florida, they go about their lives, taking only a sideways glance at the reminders of that milestone. Time, it plays tricks on us, images that vaguely jog the sharp edges of reality. But we turn the trick and summon up our own reality, images, sounds, to help us remember.
32 minutes past the hour, the start of launch window on this Saturday and on the moon. Of course, the countdown still proceeds. The lunar module, which has been
Time, it plays tricks on us. It smudges and blurs the sharp edges of reality. But we turn the trick and summon up our own reality, millions of them, to this place, drawn by the magnet of history in the making.
Astronauts, the prime crew, were awakened at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight and proceeded to have a physical examination in which they were declared flight ready. They sat down for the normal astronaut fare on launch day. As far as breakfast is concerned, orange juice, steak, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. The 2 batteries in the ascent stage. The target for the Apollo 11 astronauts.
They came 1 million of them to this place, drawn by the magnet of history in the making.
The prime crew were awakened at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight and proceeded to have a physical examination in which they were declared flight ready. They sat down for the normal astronaut fare on launch day. As far as breakfast is concerned, orange juice, steak, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee.